Everyday foods that grocery store employees often purchase quietly before they clock out for the day could completely change the way you think about shopping. What's especially fascinating is that many store workers don't wait for shelves to start looking empty before they buy these items. Instead, they react to warning signs that most customers never even notice. Even when incoming shipments are reduced by only 20 to 30%, grocery aisles can still appear fully stocked to the average shopper. Behind the scenes, however, inventory levels may already be tightening significantly. While customers see price labels and shelves that seem packed with products, employees have access to a very different picture. They notice smaller orders arriving from suppliers, delayed deliveries, upcoming price increases waiting to be entered into the system, and product codes that are about to be phased out. Because of this insider knowledge, many grocery workers quietly purchase certain items for their own households before shortages or price increases become obvious to everyone else. In this video, we'll take a closer look at the 12 foods that many grocery store employees choose to bring home before the end of their shift. Number 12. Ground beef and steak. If there's one section of the grocery store that experienced employees tend to keep a close eye on, it's the meat department. They're not rushing to buy beef because they're afraid they'll have nothing to eat that evening. They're doing it because they understand that today's price may be the lowest they'll see for the rest of the week. For most shoppers, a package of ground beef or a ribeye steak is simply another option for dinner. But for someone who works behind the scenes, those packages tell a much bigger story. Employees pay attention to details that customers rarely notice. How much beef was delivered that day, which cuts arrived in limited quantities, which packages were marked down for quick sale, and whether price increases are already scheduled in the store's system. That's why, when store employees spot a high-quality package with a markdown sticker, they usually don't continue shopping and plan to come back later. They know from experience that waiting even a few hours can mean losing the opportunity altogether. By the end of the day, those discounted packages are often already gone. What makes beef particularly important to watch isn't just the rising cost. The supply itself has become far less predictable than it was in previous years. According to data from the USDA, the United States cattle population has fallen to its lowest level in decades after years of drought conditions, increasing feed expenses, and ranchers reducing the size of their herds. When transportation costs, processing expenses, and labor shortages are added to the equation, every pound of beef carries more economic pressure than most consumers realize. As a result, many shoppers are already seeing ground beef priced between $6 and $7 per pound in numerous regions, while ribeye steaks commonly range from $14 to $18 per pound, with premium cuts in major metropolitan areas often charging even more. One common misconception is that waiting until the weekend guarantees better deals. In reality, weekends usually bring larger crowds, not larger discounts. Many of the best markdowns appear during the morning or early afternoon hours and are purchased quickly by store employees, experienced bargain hunters, and regular customers who know exactly what to look for. By the time many people shop after Sunday lunch, the situation has often changed. Fewer choices remain, and the prices on what's left may be noticeably higher. A smarter approach is to visit the meat department during less crowded hours. Look for newly applied markdown stickers, check the packaging date carefully, and pay attention to the color and appearance of the meat. Once you bring it home, avoid leaving large family packs sitting in the refrigerator for several days. Number 11. Frozen chicken. If you notice a grocery store employee placing a couple of bags of frozen chicken into their cart just before heading home, it's probably not because they're planning tonight's dinner. More often, they've spotted something that most shoppers would never notice: a sale that's about to end, a smaller than expected shipment, or a popular product that's running low in the freezer section. Store employees don't stock up on frozen chicken because it's exciting or luxurious. They do it because it answers one of the most common household questions: how do you put an affordable meal on the table without constantly worrying about the grocery budget? Compared with beef, which can experience significant price fluctuations, chicken remains one of the most budget-friendly protein options for many American families. In grocery stores across the country, frozen chicken breasts, thighs, and wings commonly sell for around $3 to $5 per pound. And when those prices drop even slightly during a promotion, experienced shoppers know that the best deals often disappear quickly. That's why grocery employees rarely wait until the weekend to make their purchase. If they see a good price, they buy it immediately and store it in their freezer, treating it almost like a form of insurance for future family meals. One of the biggest advantages of frozen chicken is its versatility. A single bag can provide ingredients for grilled chicken dinners, comforting soups, lunch salads, quick weeknight stir-fries, or several days of meal prep. Simply changing the seasonings or cooking method can make the same ingredient feel like an entirely new meal. For households trying to reduce spending on restaurant meals or takeout, frozen chicken offers an easy way to save money without making dinner feel repetitive. A common mistake, however, is bringing home a large package and placing the entire bag directly into the freezer. Later, when it's time to cook, you're forced to thaw everything at once. If you don't use all of it, some may end up being wasted, and refreezing thawed chicken can noticeably affect its texture and quality. A more practical strategy is to divide the chicken into portions sized for 1 or 2 meals before freezing. Wrap each portion securely, vacuum seal it if possible, label it with the purchase date, and freeze it immediately. When stored at a stable temperature, frozen chicken can maintain excellent quality for roughly 9 to 12 months. Number 10. Eggs. When it comes to eggs, grocery store employees don't wait for empty shelves to recognize that something may be changing. Sometimes, all it takes is a noticeable increase in the price tag to signal that supply conditions are starting to shift. That's why eggs are one of the products many employees pay attention to almost every day. Compared with many other grocery items, egg prices can change surprisingly fast. A carton of eggs may cost between $3 and $5 today, but when supplies begin to tighten, prices for organic and cage-free varieties can rise rapidly, often before most shoppers understand what's happening. Unlike many other foods, eggs react very quickly to disruptions in the supply chain. One major reason is that events affecting poultry farms can have an immediate impact on production. For example, when outbreaks of avian influenza affect large egg-producing operations, millions of laying hens may be lost, causing supplies to shrink almost overnight. The USDA closely monitors egg markets, tracking changes in production, demand, and pricing, with particular attention given to organic and cage-free eggs because their supply is already more limited than that of conventional eggs. Because of this, grocery employees don't simply glance at the egg display. They pay attention to incoming deliveries, monitor price updates, and notice how quickly customers are taking cartons from the refrigerated shelves. There are times when, shortly before the end of their shift, employees will quietly purchase a carton or two for their own households. Not because they're trying to hoard eggs, but because they know that the current price may not be available the next time they shop. Most customers assume that eggs will always be readily available. However, people who work in grocery stores understand that the difference between fully stocked shelves and sharply rising prices can sometimes be measured in just a few days. Number 9. Butter. When grocery store employees buy extra butter before heading home, it's usually not because they suddenly decided to bake a cake that evening. More often, they're responding to something less obvious. They know that while the holiday baking season may still be weeks or months away, butter prices have already begun to shift. If you've ever noticed a store employee placing several boxes of butter into their cart near the end of a shift, chances are it wasn't an impulse purchase. They may have spotted a temporary promotion that's about to end, or they may already know that the next shipment is expected to arrive at a higher wholesale cost. Butter is one of those everyday staples that can react surprisingly quickly to changes throughout the dairy industry. When expenses such as animal feed, fuel, labor, refrigeration, and transportation increase, dairy producers feel the pressure, and those rising costs eventually work their way onto grocery store shelves. In many supermarkets across the United States, a 1-pound package of butter typically sells for around $4 to $6. However, as major baking holidays approach, particularly Thanksgiving and Christmas, prices can rise rapidly as demand increases and households begin stocking up for seasonal recipes. What makes butter especially frustrating for shoppers is that price increases rarely happen all at once. Instead, they tend to occur gradually. One week, the price is only a few cents higher. The following week, a familiar sale promotion disappears. Then, a month later, shoppers suddenly realize they're paying an extra dollar for the exact same package they purchased before. Most customers don't notice these changes until they're standing in front of the dairy case, wondering why their usual brand costs so much more than they remember. Grocery store employees, on the other hand, often recognize the trend much earlier because they understand which promotions represent genuine savings and which sales are designed primarily to attract customers into the store. Number 8. Coffee. The first sign of a shortage in a grocery store doesn't always appear on the shelves. Sometimes it shows up on a computer screen that customers never see. One day, a product appears available in the store's ordering system. The next day, an employee notices a warning message: SKU temporarily unavailable, or no estimated restock date. Meanwhile, shoppers walking through the coffee aisle see nothing unusual. The shelves still look full, and the familiar brands remain neatly arranged. But behind the scenes, many grocery employees already understand that a change is beginning, one that customers may not recognize until weeks later. That's one reason why some store employees choose to pick up an extra bag of coffee before ending their shift. They're not necessarily worried that the shelves will be empty tomorrow. Instead, they understand that when a product code disappears from the ordering system, it can be an early indication of larger changes happening throughout the supply chain. At first, the change may seem minor. Perhaps a particular dark roast becomes unavailable. Then a favorite whole bean variety disappears. After that, the usual package size may be replaced with a smaller one. Eventually, the price itself begins to increase. Several factors contribute to these shifts. Brazil, the world's largest coffee-producing country, has experienced repeated periods of extreme weather that have affected coffee harvests. At the same time, transportation, processing, packaging, and distribution costs have remained elevated. Certain imported coffee products have also faced additional pressure from tariffs and other trade-related expenses. Rather than implementing dramatic price increases all at once, many companies have adopted a less obvious strategy known as shrinkflation. The packaging often appears unchanged, but the amount of coffee inside the bag becomes smaller. As a result, consumers gradually end up paying more per cup without immediately realizing that the quantity has been reduced. Number 7. Extra virgin olive oil. When supply problems affect extra virgin olive oil, they rarely announce themselves with empty shelves or dramatic shortages. Instead, the first warning signs often appear quietly behind the scenes, in the inventory systems that grocery store employees monitor every day. One week, a store may be allowed to order 8 cases of a particular brand. The following week, that number might be reduced to 4. A familiar 1-liter bottle suddenly becomes marked as temporarily unavailable, while a smaller 750 milliliter version remains on the shelf at a price that initially doesn't seem very different. To most shoppers, it looks like the same product is still available. But employees understand what's really happening. Customers are often paying more for less oil. That's why many grocery workers don't hesitate when they find extra virgin olive oil at a genuinely discounted price. They know from experience that the generous promotions of previous years have become increasingly rare. Larger bottles tend to sell out first, shipments arrive in smaller quantities, promotional periods are shorter, and some stores are even limited in how many cases they can order. While the average customer sees shelves that still contain several rows of olive oil, store employees are noticing other signals entirely: updated price labels, smaller deliveries, reduced inventory in storage areas, and signs of supply pressure originating thousands of miles away. Tracing those signals back often leads to countries such as Spain, Italy, and Portugal, which are among the world's most important olive oil producers. When these regions experience prolonged drought conditions, olive harvests decline, reducing overall production. As supplies tighten, every bottle exported to markets like the United States becomes more expensive before it even reaches a grocery shelf. Once transportation costs, bottling expenses, storage fees, import duties, and retail markups are added, prices become much more difficult to bring back down. Number 6. Canned salmon. A grocery store employee named Raymond once made an observation while reviewing the upcoming weekly sales promotions. Canned salmon isn't on the sale list anymore. To most customers, that statement wouldn't sound particularly important. But for people who work in grocery stores, the disappearance of a familiar promotion can be an early indication that something is changing behind the scenes. Just the week before, canned salmon may have been featured in a buy 2 get 1 free offer. Now the promotion has vanished. A popular 14.75-ounce Alaskan salmon product can no longer be ordered, and the larger cans gradually disappear from the shelves. In their place, shoppers may find only smaller sizes or a store brand alternative that appears cheaper at first glance but actually contains less fish. Many consumers assume that rising salmon prices are simply the result of fish becoming more scarce. The reality is more complicated. In many cases, the cost of the packaging and supply chain is increasing almost as quickly as the cost of the salmon itself. A can of salmon represents much more than the fish inside. Its price reflects conditions during the Alaskan fishing season, fuel costs for fishing vessels, processing facilities, metal can production, paper packaging, refrigerated transportation, warehouse storage, labor expenses, and in some cases, international shipping and import costs. When any one of these parts of the supply chain becomes more expensive, the price consumers see on the shelf often rises as well. Grocery store employees tend to notice these changes long before shoppers do because they monitor inventory systems and supplier orders. During some weeks, stores may be restricted in how many cases they can purchase. At other times, a familiar brand may suddenly be marked as temporarily unavailable. Employees may also observe that salmon shipments are shrinking while other canned seafood products, such as tuna or sardines, continue arriving without interruption. Number 5. Pure honey. When it comes to honey, the earliest warning sign of a price increase usually isn't an empty shelf. Instead, it's often something much more subtle. The familiar 24-ounce bottle disappears, leaving behind a smaller 12-ounce version that costs nearly the same amount. Most shoppers walk right past this change without noticing, but grocery store employees tend to spot it immediately. So when an employee quietly adds an extra jar of pure honey to their cart before heading home, it's rarely because they're suddenly craving something sweet. More often, they've noticed that sales on raw, unfiltered, or locally sourced honey are becoming less frequent. They may have also seen that larger containers are arriving in smaller quantities, or that stores are only being allowed to order a limited number of cases. Honey occupies a unique position among grocery products because, when it's pure and stored correctly, it can remain usable for an extremely long time. That longevity is one reason why changes in the honey supply chain deserve more attention than many shoppers realize. Unlike manufactured foods that originate in factories, honey production begins with healthy bee colonies, flowering plants, favorable weather conditions, and successful beekeeping seasons. When bee populations decline or issues such as colony collapse disorder affect hives, honey production can be disrupted at its source. If domestic supplies become limited, retailers often rely more heavily on imported honey, and increases in import costs, transportation expenses, or inspection requirements can quickly affect retail prices. Only a few years ago, many consumers could regularly purchase a standard jar of honey for around $5 to $8. Today, prices for many varieties of pure honey commonly range from $8 to $12, while raw and unfiltered varieties often cost significantly more. Number 4. Block cheese. There's a question that grocery store employees are occasionally asked by friends and family. If you could choose one type of cheese to get for free every time, which would it be? The answer often surprises people. Most employees don't choose shredded cheese, even though it's convenient and widely popular. Instead, they almost always pick a block of cheese. After spending years working around food pricing and inventory, they've discovered that this simple choice is one of the easiest and least obvious ways to save money at the grocery store. At first glance, pre-shredded cheese appears to be the better option. It's convenient, requires no preparation, and can be used immediately. There's no need to pull out a grater or spend extra time preparing ingredients for a meal. However, that convenience usually comes at a cost. When you compare the price per ounce, blocks of cheddar, mozzarella, and other common cheeses are typically less expensive than their pre-shredded counterparts. In many cases, shoppers end up paying a noticeable premium simply for having the cheese already shredded. There is another difference that grocery employees often point out. To prevent the shredded pieces from clumping together inside the bag, manufacturers commonly coat pre-shredded cheese with anti-caking agents. These ingredients are considered safe, but they're unnecessary when purchasing cheese in block form. Storage is another reason many employees prefer block cheese. Hard cheeses, when kept in their original packaging and frozen correctly, can retain good quality for several months. When it's time to use them, the cheese can be transferred to the refrigerator and grated as needed. This approach offers several advantages. It helps reduce food waste, allows households to keep a versatile ingredient on hand for a wide variety of meals, and minimizes the need for extra trips to the grocery store. Number 3. Imported pasta. When changes begin affecting imported pasta, the first clue usually isn't an empty shelf. Instead, it's something far less obvious. The familiar 16-ounce package quietly disappears and is replaced by a 12-ounce version selling for nearly the same price. Most shoppers walk by without noticing anything unusual. To them, it's still the same brand and the same pasta they've always bought. Grocery store employees, however, often see a very different picture. They notice that the original product code can no longer be ordered. Deliveries are arriving in smaller quantities, promotional discounts are becoming less frequent, and imported Italian brands that once occupied entire shelves have been reduced to just a handful of packages. One of the biggest misconceptions about pasta is that all varieties offer essentially the same quality. In reality, imported pasta produced in Italy, particularly pasta made from 100% durum wheat, often has a different texture, cooks differently, and holds sauces more effectively than many lower-cost alternatives. But grocery employees aren't only paying attention to the quality of the pasta itself. They also understand everything required to get that package onto a store shelf. Behind every box is a long supply chain involving durum wheat production, manufacturing facilities in Italy, international shipping containers, import terminals, distribution centers, transportation networks, and retail operations. When costs increase at any point along that chain, the price consumers pay eventually rises as well. In many grocery stores across the United States, standard pasta products typically sell for around $1.25 to $2 per package. Imported Italian pasta and higher quality products made from 100% durum wheat often range from about $2.50 to $4 or more. Premium brands can become even more expensive when shipping costs, import duties, or wheat prices increase. The earliest signs of these changes are often subtle, and grocery employees tend to notice them first. A familiar brand no longer appears in promotional advertisements. Supplier orders arrive only partially filled. A larger package quietly disappears and is replaced by a smaller one occupying the exact same shelf space. Number 2. Jasmine and basmati rice. Many grocery store employees share a quiet shopping habit that most customers never notice. Even when they still have plenty of rice at home, they often purchase an additional bag of jasmine or basmati rice every month. They're not doing this because they're worried about an immediate shortage or because they expect store shelves to be empty the next day. Instead, they're following a simple principle that years of working in retail have taught them. Rice is usually best purchased before you urgently need it, while prices remain reasonable and your preferred variety is still readily available. This approach isn't about panic buying. It's about maintaining a consistent supply at home so that sudden price increases or temporary shortages have less impact on the household budget. For the average shopper, rice is simply a staple food item. Grocery store employees, however, often see it as an indicator of broader trends involving international trade, transportation costs, and shifts in global demand. Jasmine rice is largely produced in countries such as Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia, while basmati rice primarily comes from India and Pakistan. Because these products depend heavily on international supply chains, factors such as poor weather conditions, increased shipping costs, or export restrictions can affect prices surprisingly quickly. The earliest warning sign rarely appears as an empty rice aisle. More often, it starts when a large package size quietly disappears. A familiar 20-pound bag may no longer be available, leaving only a 10-pound version that appears less expensive but actually costs more per pound. Grocery employees often notice these changes before customers do. They see smaller shipments arriving, reduced inventory orders, temporary shortages of larger bags, and popular rice varieties being replaced by smaller package sizes. While shoppers continue seeing bags of rice on the shelves, employees recognize that inventory levels are gradually becoming tighter. Pricing trends tell the same story. Not long ago, a 20-pound bag of jasmine or basmati rice often sold for approximately $18 to $25. Today, in many regions, that same size bag commonly costs between $25 and $35, with premium varieties selling for even more. Number 1. Rotisserie chicken. Toward the end of the evening, when the crowds begin to thin out and most shoppers are heading toward the checkout lines, a familiar routine often unfolds near the hot food section of many grocery stores. Employees finishing their shifts don't always head directly to their cars. Instead, some make one final stop at the rotisserie chicken counter, glance at the warming case, and pick up a chicken before leaving. They're not doing this because they expect a shortage the next day. They do it because they understand something that many shoppers overlook. rotisserie chicken remains one of the best values available anywhere in the store. What surprises many people is that grocery stores often don't price rotisserie chickens to maximize profit. In retail, products like these are known as loss leaders, items intentionally sold at very low prices to attract customers into the store. That's one reason why major retailers such as Costco have maintained rotisserie chicken prices at around $4.99 for many years, while stores operated by Walmart typically sell them for approximately $5.97 to $7.97, depending on the location. Every year, Costco alone sells more than 100 million rotisserie chickens. In many individual stores, hundreds can be purchased in a single day. Grocery employees understand this better than almost anyone else. They know exactly when fresh batches come out of the ovens, which hours generate the highest demand, and that arriving too late often means finding only a few chickens remaining, or none at all. During busy weekends, freshly cooked chickens may disappear almost as quickly as they're placed in the warming case. That's one reason many employees stop by the counter shortly before ending their shift. They're not searching for discounts or markdowns. They're simply making sure they don't miss one of the strongest values available in the entire store. The value goes beyond the initial meal itself. A single rotisserie chicken can easily provide food for multiple meals. It can be enjoyed fresh for dinner, then repurposed the next day into sandwiches, salads, tacos, soups, or even comforting dishes like chicken porridge. Even the leftover bones can be used to prepare homemade broth. What all 12 items we've discussed today have in common isn't that they're about to disappear from grocery stores. The more important observation is that grocery employees often recognize changes in value long before most shoppers notice them.